The sun beat down on the small, dusty mining town of Redemption, baking the wooden shacks and the cracked earth. Dust devils danced in the distance, swirling ominously towards the foothills of the Sierra Nevada. Jedediah Jed Stone, a prospector whose face was a roadmap of sun-baked wrinkles, wiped sweat from his brow with a calloused hand. He'd seen hard times, but nothing quite like the gloom that had settled over Redemption in recent months. It started shortly after the discovery of the new silver vein deep within the Black Gulch mine. Initial excitement had quickly curdled into fear. First, it was the small, strange occurrences. Tools vanishing from locked sheds, the sounds of distant whispers echoing from the mine shafts when no one was inside, and the sudden, inexplicable collapses that trapped miners for hours, though miraculously never killing them. Then came the disappearances. Old Man Hemlock, the grizzled assayer, simply vanished from his cabin one night, leaving behind a half-eaten meal and an open Bible. A week later, Silas Croft, a young, eager prospector, walked into the mine and never walked out. His pickaxe was found near the entrance, still embedded in rock, but of Silas, there was no trace. The town sheriff, a burly no-nonsense man named Bartholomew Bart O'Malley, attributed it to claim jumpers or stray grizzlies. But Jed, who had seen enough of the Wild West to know the difference between man, beast, and something else, felt a prickle of cold dread. The air around Black Gulch Mine felt heavy, thick with a malevolent energy that made the hairs on his arms stand on end. One sweltering afternoon, Jed was loading ore wagons outside the mine's main shaft. The sun was still high, but a strange, unnatural shadow seemed to cling to the mine entrance, even in the brightest light. He heard a faint, rhythmic clanking sound from deep within the shaft, like metal striking rock. It was too regular to be natural, too deliberate to be accidental, and it sounded like it was getting closer. He called out, "Hello? Anyone down there?" His voice echoed into the darkness, swallowed by the depths. There was no reply, only the persistent rhythmic clanking, now joined by a low, guttural groaning that sent a shiver down his spine. It wasn't the sound of a man in pain. It was something ancient, something suffering and yet filled with a terrible hunger. Suddenly, his mule, Old Bess, let out a terrified bray and yanked violently at her harness, almost breaking free. Her eyes were wide with fright, fixed on the mine entrance. Jed looked back. From the deepest shadows of the shaft, something emerged. It wasn't a man, not anymore. It was a distorted humanoid figure, its body covered in what looked like fused rock and glittering silver ore. Its limbs were elongated and gangly, ending in hands that resembled gnarled roots, each tipped with a sharp, metallic claw. It moved with a slow, agonizing shuffle, the clanking sound coming from its very form as the silver ore scraped against itself. Its head was a grotesque mockery of a human skull, partially encased in rock. Where eyes should have been, two pinpricks of sickly green light glowed with an ancient malevolence. And from its wide, lipless mouth, a chilling, dry moan escaped, filled with an unearthly hunger that promised only despair. It was the creature of the mine, and it was finally showing itself. Jed dropped the shovel, his blood running cold. This was no claim jumper, no grizzly. This was the curse of Black Gulch, manifested. And it was coming for him. Jedediah Stone didn't hesitate. The sight of the monstrous, ore-encrusted figure emerging from the mine shaft snapped him out of his initial shock. This wasn't some campfire tale. This was raw, unnatural horror made flesh, or rather, made of rock and silver. He didn't have time to think, only to react. He scrambled back, his boots kicking up dust, instinctively reaching for the pickaxe he kept tucked into the side of the ore wagon. The creature from the mine, its green eyes glowing with malevolence, let out another dry, rasping moan and shuffled forward, its silver-tipped claws scraping against the earth with an unnerving clanking sound. It moved with a slow, grinding inevitability, each step a heavy thud, as if the very rock was alive and struggling to move. Jed knew a direct fight was suicide. He was old, and this thing looked like it could shrug off a cannonball. His only chance was to gain distance, to get to his rifle in the cabin. He swung the heavy pickaxe wildly, not aiming to hit, but to create a momentary barrier. The creature paused, its faceless head tilting, the green lights in its eye sockets dimming slightly as if in momentary confusion. That was all Jed needed. He turned and sprinted towards the dusty path leading to Redemption's main street, his lungs burning. Old Bess, the mule, had already bolted, a cloud of dust marking her terrified flight towards the town. The creature didn't give chase immediately. It stood at the mine entrance, its grotesque form shimmering in the afternoon sun, the clanking sound becoming less frequent, more deliberate. It seemed to be listening. Jed didn't look back. He ran until his side ached, until the small, ramshackle buildings of Redemption started to appear through the heat haze. He burst into Sheriff Bart O'Malley's office, slamming the door shut behind him, gasping for air. Sheriff Bart, a mountain of a man with a walrus mustache, looked up from a stack of wanted posters. Jed, what in tarnation? Mine. Black Gulch. Jed wheezed, pointing back the way he came. Something's in there. Not a man, Bart. It's rock and silver. It's the curse. Bart scoffed, though a flicker of unease crossed his face. Calm down, Jed. You've been out in the sun too long. Probably just a hallucination from that bad moonshine Doc Henderson sells. No, Jed insisted, fighting for breath. It took Silas. It took Hemlock. It's not a hallucination. It's alive. It's coming. As if on cue, a distant clanking sound echoed faintly through the still air of Redemption, followed by a low, guttural groaning that made the very windows of the sheriff's office seem to vibrate. The sound was unmistakable. It was closer now. Sheriff Bart's face paled. He grabbed his shotgun from the rack, his previous skepticism replaced by a grim realization. He'd heard the whispers too, dismissed the strange occurrences. But that sound, it was unlike anything he'd ever heard, a sound that spoke of unearthly pain and ancient malice. The townsfolk, drawn by the commotion, began to gather in the street, their faces a mixture of curiosity and growing alarm as the strange sounds from the mine grew louder. Jed, Bart said, his voice low and serious. How big is this thing? Bigger than any man, Jed said, his eyes wide. And it's made of the mine itself, made of silver and rock. Suddenly, the familiar, chilling, dry moan of the creature filled the air, much closer now, seeming to come from just beyond the edge of town. A collective gasp went through the crowd. Panic began to ripple through Redemption. Women clutched their children, men instinctively reached for whatever weapon they could find. Bart peered out the office door, his shotgun held ready. He saw nothing yet, but the sounds were undeniable. The clanking was now clear, heavy, rhythmic, punctuated by that dreadful, insatiable moan. It was no longer a secret confined to the mine. The curse of Black Gulch had arrived in Redemption. The clanking, groaning monstrosity finally emerged from the dust cloud at the edge of Redemption, its silhouette distorted by the shimmering heat. It moved with a slow, relentless purpose, its silver-tipped claws scraping against the dry street as it advanced. The townsfolk, who had gathered in nervous clusters, let out cries of terror and scattered, scrambling for the perceived safety of their flimsy wooden homes and shops. Sheriff Bart O'Malley, his face grim, barked orders. Everyone inside. Lock your doors. Jed, you with me. Jedediah, despite his fear, stood firm beside the sheriff, his old Colt revolver now clutched in his hand. Others, brave or foolish, stood with them. A few of the younger miners armed with pickaxes, and old Ma Turner gripping a rusty shotgun from her porch. The creature paid them no mind, its glowing green eyes fixed on something else entirely. It lumbered past the first row of buildings, heading directly for the town's well, a vital source of water in this parched land. As it moved, a chilling phenomenon occurred. The very ground around its heavy, dragging feet seemed to turn to dust, the sparse, hardy weeds shriveling and disintegrating instantly. "It's taking the moisture!" Jed yelled, a horrifying realization dawning on him. "It's what killed the cattle. It's thirsty." The monster reached the well, its immense form dwarfing the stone structure. It extended one of its long clawed hands, plunging it into the cool, dark water. As its hand submerged, a furious hissing sound erupted, like boiling iron. The water in the well began to recede rapidly, swirling down as if being sucked into a monstrous void. The air around the creature grew thick with an oppressive dryness, sucking the moisture from their very mouths and eyes. Sheriff Bart, seeing the lifeblood of their town being devoured, raised his shotgun. "It ain't getting our water," he roared and fired both barrels. The buckshot hammered against the creature's back with dull thuds, sparking off the silver ore that coated its form. It shrieked, a dry, rattling sound that tore at the nerves, but it didn't stop consuming the well. Its body, however, seemed to absorb the impact, leaving only faint scorch marks. Jed fired his revolver, aiming for one of the glowing green eyes, just as he'd done in the canyon. The bullet struck the creature's skull near an eye socket, and for a split second, the green light flickered, and the creature paused its horrifying feast. "The eyes!" Jed shouted, reloading his revolver with trembling hands. "They're its weakness." The creature, its thirst momentarily interrupted, slowly turned its head towards them, its lipless mouth stretched in that silent, eternal moan. The green glow in its eyes intensified, fixing on Jed and Bart. Its massive, clanking form began to pivot away from the well, now fully focused on the men who dared to challenge its hunger. The wind picked up, swirling the dust Jed's gunshots had raised, mingling it with the strange, desiccated particles that emanated from the creature. The sun beat down, but an unholy chill, a profound absence of warmth, radiated from the monster. It was coming for them, and it wouldn't stop until it had drained everything it could. Sheriff Bart, his face etched with grim determination, understood Jed's desperate shout. The creature's eyes were indeed its weakness. "Aim for the green glow," he bellowed, his voice straining over the creature's dry, rasping moans and the growing panic in the street. Jed fired his Colt again, the shot striking the monster's face, making the remaining green glow flicker violently. The creature let out a horrifying, grinding shriek, like two enormous rocks scraping against each other. It was a sound that scraped against the soul, making every tooth ache. Bart raised his shotgun, aiming for the same spot. "Fire, you fools!" he yelled at the stunned townsfolk. A few men, spurred by desperation, raised their own rifles and shotguns, their courage overriding their terror. A scattered volley of gunfire erupted, peppering the creature's massive form. Most of the shots seemed to have little effect, merely striking its hard, mineral skin with dull thuds. But every bullet that landed near its eyes seemed to cause a shudder, a momentary disruption in its horrifying stillness. The creature roared, a sound like dry thunder rolling through the canyon. It finally tore itself away from the depleted well, its gaze now fixed solely on the cluster of defiant townsfolk. With a horrifying increase in speed, it lunged forward, its long, clawed arms reaching out. The clanking became a furious rhythm, a dreadful symphony of impending doom. It swiped at the nearest miner, a young man named Billy who had bravely stood his ground with a pickaxe. The monstrous claw, tipped with razor-sharp silver ore, connected with Billy's chest. There was no cry, no blood. Billy simply shriveled, his body collapsing in on itself as if all the moisture had been instantly sucked from him, leaving behind only a desiccated husk that crumpled to the dusty ground. A collective gasp of horror ripped through the remaining townsfolk. This wasn't just a monster, it was a force that stole life itself, leaving nothing but dust. The sight of Billy's fate broke the last vestiges of their courage. They fled, screaming, scrambling into alleys and behind buildings, leaving Jed and Bart almost alone in the street. "Jed, we can't fight this thing head-on," Bart yelled, firing another shotgun blast that merely chipped a piece of rock from the creature's shoulder. "It's too tough. We need a plan." Jed's eyes darted around, desperation clawing at him. His gaze fell upon the dynamite storage shack near the entrance of the mine, a small, heavily reinforced building set slightly apart from the main shaft. It was a risky idea, a suicidal one even, but it was the only thing that might have the power to stop this abomination. "Dynamite!" Jed shouted, pointing a trembling finger. "The storage shack! We can blow it to dust." Bart followed his gaze, his eyes widening. "Are you mad, Jed? That'll take half the town with it." "No other way, Bart," Jed insisted, reloading his revolver. "It's taking our water, our lives. It's going to drain Redemption dry. It came from the mine, maybe we can send it back to hell with the mine." The creature, its dry moan echoing with triumph after its kill, continued its slow, inexorable advance towards Jed and Bart. Its green eyes glowed brighter, its hunger seemingly amplified by the life it had just consumed. The ground around it continued to desiccate, the air growing colder, drier. Bart looked from the creature to Jed, then to the dynamite shack. He knew Jed was right. This was a battle for their very existence. "All right, Jed," he roared. "You distract it. I'll get to the shack." Sheriff Bart O'Malley didn't wait for a reply. He sprinted, a surprising burst of speed for a man of his size, weaving through the deserted street towards the dynamite storage shack. The air vibrated with the creature's menacing presence, and the clanking of its metallic form echoed relentlessly. Jedediah, knowing his role, stood his ground. "Hey, you pile of rocks!" he yelled, his voice cracking but resolute. He emptied his revolver, aiming each shot at the creature's remaining, flickering green eye. Each hit made the monster shudder, its movements faltering for a terrifying second, giving Bart precious time. The creature's dry, rasping moan intensified into a guttural growl, its immense form slowly turning to face Jed, its glowing eye fixing on him with an infernal hunger. As Bart reached the reinforced door of the dynamite shack, he fumbled with the heavy padlock. His hands trembled, but he forced them steady, his fingers fumbling with the cold metal. The clanking was deafening now, directly behind Jed, who was backing away slowly, firing his last, futile shots. Bart heard the sickening sound of the creature's claws scraping against the wooden planks of a nearby building, tearing through it as if it were paper. Finally, with a desperate yank, the padlock sprang open. Bart burst inside, the air thick with the acrid scent of gunpowder and sulfur. He grabbed a handful of dynamite sticks, their red casings stark against the dim light, and yanked out a length of fuse. His mind raced. He had to set the charge, light it, and get out, all before the creature could reach Jed. Outside, Jed was at the end of his rope. His revolver clicked empty. The creature was upon him, its colossal form casting an unholy shadow. The air around its gaping maw was impossibly dry, sucking the moisture from his eyes, making them burn. He could feel the unholy chill radiating from its very being. The green light in its single eye flared with triumph. Just as the creature's clawed hand reached for Jed, Bart reappeared at the shack's door, a lit match flaring in his hand. "Jed, get clear!" he roared, thrusting the ignited fuse into the bundle of dynamite. The fuse sputtered, a tiny spark against the overwhelming dread. Jed didn't need to be told twice. He threw himself backwards, rolling desperately as the monster, distracted by the sudden light and sound, turned its attention to Bart. The creature let out a furious, rattling shriek, abandoning Jed to focus on the new threat, the one holding the volatile sticks. Bart didn't hesitate. He tossed the lit dynamite bundle directly at the creature's chest, then turned and ran as fast as his legs could carry him, heading for the meager cover of a water trough. The monster's glowing eye fixed on the smoking bundle. It paused, a flicker of what seemed like confusion or perhaps even a primitive understanding in its dead mineral eyes. Then, with a delayed horrific realization, it let out a final ear-splitting wail, a sound of pure, unadulterated agony and rage, as the dynamite, strapped to its chest, reached its end. A blinding flash of light ripped through the dusty air of redemption, followed by a deafening explosion that shook the very foundations of the town. The ground bucked violently, throwing Jed and Bart to their feet. A cloud of dust, smoke, and shattered rock erupted from the creature's location, obliterating its form in a violent, fiery tempest. When the dust slowly began to settle, revealing the ravaged street, all that remained was a gaping crater where the monster had stood. No body, no remnants of silver or rock, just a smoking, newly formed pit in the earth. The air, though thick with dust and the smell of sulfur, felt lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted. The unholy dryness was gone. The silence that followed the explosion was absolute, broken only by the whimpers of the townsfolk slowly emerging from their hiding places. Jed and Bart, bruised but alive, looked at the smoking crater. The curse of Black Gulch, the consuming hunger of the silver mine, was finally, irrevocably gone. The air in Redemption, once thick with the smell of sulfur and dust, slowly cleared, revealing a town shaken but unbroken. The crater where the creature had stood was a stark, smoking reminder of the terror that had gripped them. No one dared approach it for days, a raw wound in the earth mirroring the one left on the town's spirit. Sheriff Bart O'Malley, bruised but unbowed, oversaw the slow process of recovery. The well, miraculously, began to seep water again, a thin, muddy trickle at first, then growing into a steady stream. It was a testament to the town's resilience, a silent promise that life, though scarred, would return. The ranchers found their cattle spooked but alive, their water source slowly replenishing itself. The dryness that had plagued the land around the creature's path now faded, and the hardy desert flora, though withered, held a faint hope of recovery. For Jedediah Stone, the experience was a permanent brand. He still saw the creature's glowing green eyes when he closed his own, still felt the chilling, unholy thirst that radiated from its form. He never prospected in the Black Gulch mine again, and neither did any other miner in Redemption. The mine, once a beacon of fortune, was now a cursed monument to the unspeakable horror it had birthed. The clanking sounds that had once lured prospectors were now only heard in nightmares, a chilling echo of the monster's approach. The town of Redemption, however, found its own kind of redemption. The shared ordeal forged a new bond among its inhabitants. They were no longer just a collection of individuals chasing silver. They were a community that had faced pure evil and survived. They rebuilt what was damaged, helped each other, and looked out for one another with a newfound vigilance. Sometimes, at dusk, Jed would sit on his porch, watching the last rays of sun disappear behind the jagged peaks of the Sierra Nevada. The wind would whisper through the empty streets, and he would swear he could still hear the faint, dry moan of the creature carried on the breeze from the direction of the Black Gulch. It was a constant reminder that some scars never truly healed, and that the wild, untamed West held secrets far older and more terrible than any man could imagine. The silver in Black Gulch mine remained untouched, buried deep beneath the earth, a cursed treasure nobody dared claim. And in Redemption, life went on, forever shadowed by the memory of the creature of thirst, a chilling tale whispered around campfires, a grim legend etched into the very soul of the town.